Hi, and welcome to the channel. Here we share stories that touch the soul. Enjoy listening.
When old Henry Miller first decided to put up solar panels on his roof, the town of Midland, Texas was buzzing with laughter. The neighbors weren't laughing because it was funny, but because no one could believe that Mr. Oil and Gas, the chief engineer at Lone Star Petroleum, was suddenly haggling for solar batteries like some California hippie. "Henry," his neighbor Buck Randall told him over the fence, "I'm serious, man. The sun around here is the enemy. It's hot as hell in the summer, and you want to pay to have it fry you even more?" Henry just waved him off. He was 72, and his body felt every bone in its age. But in his head lived a stubborn, almost childlike conviction. You gotta try. It felt to him like these panels weren't just about electricity. They were about a chance to change the balance between what he'd done and what he still could do. His house was on the edge of town, white, boxy, with a rusty water tank and a satellite dish that didn't catch anything anymore except channels selling knives and junk. His wife Mary had died 6 years ago, and since then, silence had filled the house. No music, no laughter, just the creaking of the wind and the clocks ticking. It was in this silence one evening that he heard something click inside himself. It happened after a documentary he watched on his old TV. Young activists were blocking streets, protesting oil companies. Henry recognized his own corporation's logo on the banners and suddenly felt like he'd been personally soaked in oil. He didn't sleep that night. Memory dragged up pictures from the depths of the past. The derricks he stood on in his youth, the stinking plumes of smoke, the gleam of black gold on his fingers. And his boss's voice. "Henry, remember, as long as the world is drinking coffee, it needs our oil. We're its heart." He used to be proud of that. Now he was ashamed. At dawn, he called his granddaughter, Lucy. She worked somewhere in San Francisco at a company that designed green solutions for a sustainable future. Her phrases always sounded like she was reading from an ad brochure. Henry didn't understand exactly what she did, but he knew it involved those panels and the little wind things spinning in fields. "Lucy," he said into the phone, "you're the expert on all that solar stuff, right?" "Grandpa, when was the last time you turned off your computer without pouring coffee into the disk drive?" "Just once," he grumbled, "and that was 20 years ago." "All right, fair enough. What's up?" "I want to put up panels. On the roof. To make electricity." Silence hung on the other end of the line. Then Lucy's voice, suspicious and warm at the same time. "You're kidding me." "No, I swear on my bad knee." "You, the oil grandpa, want to become a solar fanatic?" "Maybe so. I just want to do something right while I can still stand up." She promised she'd come help. When her old Toyota Prius rolled up to his yard a week later, Henry went out to meet her, wiping his hands on a rag like a mechanic who just repaired his conscience. Lucy got out. Short hair, a tattoo on her wrist, sunglasses. She hugged him, breathing in the smell of moth aisles and motor oil. "You smell like the past," she joked. "And you smell like the future," he replied, and it sounded honest. They sat on the porch. Henry made lemonade. No sugar, Doc said no, and they talked plans. Lucy explained how to apply for the government rebate, how to choose the panels, how to install the inverter. He listened, but caught himself realizing he only understood every third word. Still, he didn't interrupt, just watched her gesture, watched her eyes shine. It felt good to know his granddaughter spoke a language the world hadn't forgotten how to understand yet. "Grandpa, you know these panels aren't cheap, right?" "It's not about the money. I want light, clean, without the smell of gasoline." She smiled. "You're a romantic." "I'm an engineer, Lucy. I just showed up late for my own revolution." The revolution started with problems. The company that was supposed to deliver the gear mixed up the order and brought something for a supermarket roof. When the installer showed up, it turned out his roof was too old and couldn't hold the weight of the panels. Buck Randall, the neighbor, showed up by the fence again. "Told you, Henry, this whole thing's a scam. They'll bleed you dry." "Buck," he answered calmly, "I worked with oil for 50 years. If they bleed me dry, maybe they're just washing the oil off." Buck snorted and left. And Henry, with a furrowed brow, grabbed the blueprints. The old engineer woke up in him. Precise, fussy, stubborn. He decided to do it all himself. Lucy just sighed. "Do you want me to hold the ladder again? That's exactly why I called you." For 3 days they measured, sawed, welded. The sun baked. Sweat dripped on the drawings, but some old engine was firing up inside Henry. He didn't feel old, just alive again. On the 4th day, they installed the first panel. When the indicator light went green, Lucy shouted, "We got contact!" "That's energy from the sky," Henry whispered, like a kid seeing a magic trick for the first time. He stood and watched the sun reflect in the panel's glass, and in that moment, he felt like he was touching an apology, like the world was forgiving him for the years he believed black gold was the only way forward. The next day, a reporter from the local paper showed up, a young guy in a t-shirt that said, "Future is now." "Mr. Miller, we heard you're a former oil engineer, and now I'm an old fool playing with the sun," Henry suggested. "No way!" The reporter smiled. "This is fascinating. You're like a symbol of change, a man going from oil to light. Can I take a photo?" He agreed. He stood, looking into the camera, with Lucy next to him, her hand on his shoulder. The following week, the paper ran a story with the headline, "Oil is the past. Midland Grandpa kicks off a new era." Buck bought the paper and tossed it into his mailbox with a note, "You should at least wear a helmet, Elon Musk on a pension." Henry laughed for a long time. It was the first real laugh in years. But every story has a crack for drama to seep through. A week after the launch, the system failed. The meter started flashing, the inverter made a short pfft, and the light went out. Lucy was just about to head back home. Henry stood in the dark, listening to the silence that returned like a ghost. "Don't worry, I'll leave the tech support number. They'll fix it." But he couldn't leave it to someone else. His old engineer's code wouldn't allow it. That night, he climbed onto the roof with a flashlight. The wind shook him. His old legs trembled, but he stubbornly checked the connections. When he leaned down to a cable, something clicked. A spark, a short flash. Henry jumped and almost fell. Then he just sat down on the roof and laughed. "Yeah, you old fool, one more minute and you really will fly up to heaven with your panels." He sat there until the sun rose. It seemed to him that it was looking at him not as an enemy, but as a partner. When Lucy left, silence returned to the yard, but this time it was different. Not dead, but alive. It hummed with the quiet buzz of the inverter, like a heart that had started working again. Henry started keeping a notebook. My Energy Confession. In it, he wrote everything he thought. About how the world had changed, how oil went from a blessing to a curse, how his generation believed in endless progress, but instead left behind a pile of smog and deserts. He wrote, "I spent my life building derricks. Now I want to build something that doesn't drill the earth, but looks at the sky." One day, he found an old cassette, a recording of an interview they gave for the company in the 80s. On the screen, he, young with shiny eyes, was saying, "The future is in oil. It'll never run out." Henry watched it and clenched his jaw. He said, "Kid, you have no idea how wrong you are. He rewound the tape and threw it out. Then he picked up Lucy's camera that she'd left behind and hit record. "My name is Henry Miller. I've lived a life digging up what's hidden beneath the ground, but now I want to harvest what the sky gives. If this is repentance, then so be it." A few weeks after that, a letter came for him. On the envelope, the Lone Star Petroleum logo. Henry opened it and read, "Dear Mr. Miller, we were saddened to learn of your involvement in a campaign against our company. We consider your statements to be detrimental to the firm's reputation." He burst out laughing. He went into the garage where his old hard hat and a tin can with the logo stood. He got a hammer and smashed the can. Reputation. Reputation is being able to sleep soundly, and I'm sleeping like a baby for the first time in years. September in Texas is a weird time. The sun's still hot, but the air already smells of dust and change. It was exactly that morning when the leaves on the 2 old maple trees by his yard first turned slightly yellow that Henry Miller got a call that flipped his quiet new life upside down. He was actually fixing an old generator, the same one that used to fire up a derrick somewhere in New Mexico. Now the contraption sat in his backyard, disassembled into parts, like a museum of his own mistakes. Henry was planning to use its motor to make a water pump for the garden. From oil to irrigation, he joked to himself. His phone rang in his pocket. The screen showed an unknown number, a Houston area code. The voice was formal, level, too clean for a random chat. "Mr. Miller, this is Ellen Brown, press office at Lone Star Petroleum." Henry squeezed the phone tighter. "I'm listening." She continued, "We saw your article in the local paper, and frankly, we had an idea. You could become the face of our new initiative. We're launching a transition program to renewable energy. Your story is a perfect fit." "You gotta be kidding me," Henry said, wiping his hands on a rag. "You folks at Lone Star, who've been smoking out half the state, now want me to be your symbol of a clean future? We want you to be an example of change, to show that even old engineers can think in new ways." "Even old engineers," he repeated, sounding sarcastic. Sounds like a backhanded compliment. "We'd like to meet in person. Maybe at the office, or we can come to you." "Come on over. We'll see if your future can handle the Texas sun." When he hung up, his heart was beating faster. A part of him, the older, cautious one, whispered, "Don't get into this." But the other one, the curious, stubborn one, whispered, "See what they're up to." That evening, he wrote a quick text to Lucy. "They want me to be the face of corporate green hypocrisy. What do you say?" The reply came a minute later. "Grandpa, don't do it. They just want to wash their conscience with your face." He smiled. "She's just like I used to be, sharp, certain, black and white." And yet, he thought, he had a habit of trusting even those he should have stopped listening to a long time ago. 3 days later, a delegation showed up. A white SUV, shiny as a new coin, pulled up to the yard. 2 guys in suits and the same Ellen got out. A young, energetic woman with a smile you practice in the mirror. "Mr. Miller," she stretched out her hand, "we're so glad to meet you. You've met me before. You just used the legal department to do it." Ellen didn't miss a beat. "We've changed. The world has changed. Lone Star's changing with it." She opened her tablet, showing slides, solar farms, wind turbines, slogans about sustainability. Henry watched it all like a circus show he himself had once directed. "We want you to be the face of our campaign from black gold to golden light," Ellen said. "Nice title," he nodded. "And how much does my face cost?" "We're offering $50,000 for your participation in the ads, interviews, and a documentary video. And, of course, a charitable foundation in your name." Henry laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You want me to lie again, only this time with a smile." No, we want you to tell the truth, that the world is changing, and we're changing with it. Are you really changing, or are you just taking pictures of someone who's changing for you? Ellen paused. For a moment, a flash of sincerity crossed her eyes. Maybe both, she said quietly. But this is a chance for you and for us. He was silent. The words left a bitter taste, like cold coffee. That evening he sat on the porch for a long time. The sun was slowly setting behind the horizon, and the panels on the roof were still catching the last rays. Next to him lay the newspaper with the article about him, old, crumpled, but still smelling of printing ink. Midland Grandpa kicks off a new era. He tossed it in the metal barrel where he burned leaves. The page burned up, leaving only black ash and a title that glowed in the red light. A new era. Maybe a new era needs old faces, he thought, and picked up the phone. When he told Lucy he'd agreed to meet again, she blew up. Are you serious? These are the same people who made you not look at yourself in the mirror for 10 years. I know. They'll use you. Maybe. But if I'm already on camera, I'll say what I want to say. And what's that exactly? That the truth is more expensive than an advertisement. Lucy was silent. Her voice on the phone became quiet, but with depth. Just promise me you won't let them turn you into a puppet. I'm old, but I ain't made of wood. I promise. The shooting took place in a studio in Houston. A big room with white walls, spotlights, and people scurrying around like ants. A banner on the wall read, Lone Star Renewable, the light of the future. They gave him a shirt with the company's new logo and asked him to sit in the chair in the middle of a set that looked like a solar panel array. Just say this to the camera. I was a part of the past, but now I'm a part of the future, the director said. Henry frowned. Can I change the script a little bit? Just keep the essence. The director shrugged. The camera's red light flickered on. Henry inhaled and began. I was a part of the past, and that past won't let go of me. I saw us burn the earth to light up a bulb. I believed I was doing good, but I often did harm. The director flinched. Mr. Miller, maybe a little softer? No, he replied, and continued. I don't want to be the company's symbol. I want to be a reminder that change doesn't start with corporations. It starts with a conscience. A pause. And if I've become the face of this campaign, then let it be the face of a man who figured it out too late. The camera was still blinking. Then the sound engineer quietly said, That's a wrap. Silence fell in the studio. After that, no one from Lone Star called him for a week. He figured it was all over. But then a video appeared on YouTube. Old engineer speaks the truth. Real energy is conscience. His speech was taken out of context, but the sincerity was left in. The video got 1 million views. Suddenly, cars started pulling up to his yard. Reporters, students, bloggers. They wanted a picture next to the green grandpa's house. Buck Randall couldn't take it and put up a sign near the fence. Tourist attraction, free admission, but keep it down, the chickens get nervous. He laughed, but inside he had a strange feeling, like he was part of a big game again, only this time he didn't know whose field he was playing on. A month later, a letter came from Ellen. You exceeded all expectations. We decided not to edit your message. People received it as a sincere call to action. If you're willing, we'd like to create a grant in your name for young engineers developing alternative energy. He looked at the letter for a long time. Then he sat down and wrote a reply. Make the grant, but don't name it after me. Call it the future without names, because it belongs to neither me nor you. Life returned to quiet. The sun still rose above the panels, the wind turned the turbine, and Lucy came once every 2 weeks, bringing fresh milk and sarcastic jokes. One evening as they were having dinner on the porch, Lucy looked at him.
"Do you know you're a meme now?" "Hmm?" he replied, chewing his steak. "What's my role?" "The grandpa who flipped oil to sun. They're posting you on TikTok with the caption, 'When you finally delete your old habits.' So I'm an influencer then." "Looks like it." He laughed. "Awesome. I always dreamed of getting likes for my conscience." But popularity brought a shadow too. One day, two men in work uniforms, with no name tags, were standing by his gate. "We're from Westfuel. We'd like to have a word, Mr. Miller." They spoke politely, but their eyes were cold. They asked him to soften the rhetoric in his speeches, to criticize the oil legacy less because it was bad for jobs. "You're saying I'm affecting jobs?" Henry asked back. "That's the best compliment I've had in 50 years. They left, leaving behind dust and confirmation that his words carried weight. One day, a letter came to him, not from a company but from a school kid. "Mr. Miller, I saw your video. My dad works on an oil rig and I want to build solar panels. He laughs at me, but I still want to. Thank you for proving that old people can change too. Maybe my dad can't someday." Henry reread the letter a few times. Then he carefully put it in his notebook, between the entries about his own energy confession. And for the first time in a long time, he felt his fight made sense. By the end of autumn, the first cold weather came. The sun shone lower, the panels gave less juice, and the wind turbine quietly squeaked like an old song. Henry started to feel like his strength was leaving him faster than before. One morning when he tried to lift a box of spare parts, a sharp pain shot through his heart. He sat down.
Harold always woke up early. Not because he loves sunrises, but because an old man's body runs on its own schedule, no matter how much you want to sleep in. This morning, he was sitting on his porch, holding a mug of black coffee and looking at the solar panel he'd put up yesterday. It stood straight, gleaming like a promise of a new life. He even thought it looked a little like a tombstone, just a happier color. "All right, you metal snake, let's see how long you last." He wanted to believe it would work, that the sky, which he hadn't noticed for years, would start giving light not just to the grass, but to him too. But Harold knew no piece of technology can patch a crack in your soul. That crack showed up a long time ago, back when his daughter Melissa said she wasn't coming home anymore. She didn't say it straight out, she just didn't show up the next year. Then another 2 years went by. And now it had been 10 years since he had last seen her. She lived somewhere in Seattle, working at some eco-organization, fighting oil corporations, the same ones he worked for his whole life. That was the biggest screw-up of his whole existence. He was the guy who drilled the earth, and she was the one who protected it from guys like him. Harold looked up at the solar panel and smiled. "Melissa, if you saw this, you'd think I'd gone nuts. Maybe you'd be right." By noon, he'd already managed to get into a fight with the technician who came to check the wiring. The kid, who looked younger than his own grandson, seemed to think he knew everything about power. "Your wiring's old, Mr. Green," the guy said, looking under the roof. "Gotta replace it, or the current's gonna go where it shouldn't." "And where do you figure it's gonna go? On a date with my toaster?" The tech sighed and kept working. 20 minutes later, everything was done. When he left, Harold was alone, surrounded by the quiet whisper of the wind and the smell of dust. And for the first time in years, he felt not lonely, but empty. And that's worse. Loneliness has a sound, like a clock ticking, but emptiness doesn't. He grabbed the old phone book he kept in the drawer by the fridge, found the number, Melissa, new, and stared at it for a long time. His fingers were itching to dial, but he couldn't. Not because he was scared, he just didn't know what to say. "Hey, sweetie, I'm a green energy guy now. Are you proud of me?" It sounded like a cheap joke. That evening, he drove into town to get parts for his old tractor. The road stretched through the fields, and Harold caught himself listening to the radio. Old songs, the ones he and his wife used to sing while driving out for a picnic back in the 70s. He even felt a little embarrassed that he'd forgotten how nice it was just driving. No reason, no rush, just you, the road, and the sky that was now feeding you electricity. At the gas station, he ran into a guy his age selling lemonade out of his trunk. "Hey, old-timer, give this a shot," the guy said. "Homemade, no sugar, none of that crap." "No sugar? What's the point of that?" Harold grumbled. "The point is you live longer," he winked. They got to talking. The guy's name was Raymond, a retired mechanic. He had also gone green, as he called it, once his grandkids showed up. "You know, Harold," Raymond said when they were sitting on a bench near the store, "getting old ain't when your knees hurt. It's when you stop wanting to change anything." Harold was silent, but the words stuck in his head. The next morning, he sat down in front of his solar panel again. Now it was catching the sun's rays with such confidence, like it knew it was born to do it. He hooked up the system, checked the indicator. The light came on. Power was flowing. "Well, old girl, we did it. We got light now." And for the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. There was no euphoria, no victory, just peace. Like something had finally fallen into place inside him. Maybe that's what a new life is. Not when you change the world, but when you stop running away from yourself. That same evening, he got out a sheet of paper. Not the computer, not the phone, actual paper. Writing was hard, his hand was shaking, but he started. "Hey, Melissa, I don't know if you'll even want to read this, but I did something I never thought I would. Solar panels. Can you believe it? I thought it was a bunch of crap, but I guess I was just scared. And everyone's got their own fight, and maybe I finally picked mine right. If you're ever around this area, stop by. I got light now, and a little room for a talk." He reread the letter and set it aside, didn't know if he'd send it or not. But he felt better, like after a long, deep breath. The sun was already dropping below the horizon, spilling orange light across the fields, and the panels glistened in the last rays, and Harold thought they were smiling at him, like an old friend who forgives all your sins. "Well, old planet, maybe we can still work something out, you and me." And he walked into the house, where for the first time in years, the light came on not from a bulb, but from the belief that even an oil man can turn darkness into energy. The rain started unexpectedly in the morning when the air still smelled of coffee and dust. Harold was sitting on the porch, watching the drops stream down the panels. His pride, his new hope. He even thought, this is it, the first real cleansing. But the thought hadn't faded when a white pickup pulled up the gravel road to the farm. 3 people in gray got out, 2 men and a woman. Badges gleamed on their chests, reading Department of Energy and Land Management. "Mr. Green," the woman said, without taking down her hood, "we'd like to talk about your installation." I sighed. Everything new in my life, for some reason, always ended with people with badges. "If it's about coffee, there's nothing to talk about. I already drank it," I said, and tried not to look too hostile. "We received the complaint," she said, "that you installed equipment without the proper permits on land that belongs to a federal reserve." Federal what? I frowned. "This is my land. Bought by my dad back in '56. You probably weren't even in the textbooks back then." The woman calmly opened her tablet. "According to new geological boundaries, your northern 2 acres fall under the territory of a future drilling site for Shellman Energy." "Ah, Shellman. So that's where the wind's blowing," I grumbled. "Tell them to shove their drilling pipes deeper than those 2 acres." She didn't smile. "We don't have the authority for discussion, Mr. Green, but you have 1 week to take the panels down. Otherwise, there will be fines." They left, leaving on the porch only the prints of muddy boots and the smell of wet metal. Harold stood in the rain for a long time, silently, till his old dog Duke ran up and nudged his hand. "Well, buddy, looks like the war's started again," I whispered. That evening, I pulled out my old documents, yellowed, smelling of oil and thyme. The land truly belonged to the Green family, but at the bottom, in tiny print, was the phrase, "The state retains the right to subsurface resources." Subsurface, I grumbled. "That's America for you. You can own the land, but not what's underneath it. It's like they're saying, you own the house, but the fridge is ours." I poured myself a whiskey and dialed Raymond's number. "Hey, you environmental devil. Remember you said getting old is when you stop wanting to change anything?" "Yeah, Harold." "Well, there you go. I think I'm young again." The next morning, another guest showed up at my gate. Not government, but corporate. A young man in an expensive suit, with a smile that gleamed like a supermarket window. "Mr. Green, I'm a representative of Shellman Energy. We'd like to make you an offer." "You all got offers," I said, "and I only got 1 garden, and it's not for sale." "We're offering fair compensation. The land here is strategic. You can't even imagine the resources under it." "I can't imagine, son. I used to pull those resources out with my own hands, and I saw cities die because of them." "But this is about jobs." The man pushed the right button. "The economy." I laughed. "You ever seen a drill rig stop the rain, huh? Or an oil check cure loneliness?" The man looked uneasy. "I'm just doing my job." "And I'm doing mine, protecting the sun while you dig for darkness." The week went fast. On Friday, the same 3 people with badges returned. The woman didn't look him straight in the eye this time. Clearly, she didn't want this assignment. "Mr. Green, the deadline's passed. We're forced to issue a demolition order." "And I'm forced to ignore it," I said calmly. "You know where the exit is." They left, but a few hours later, the police showed up. 2 officers, one older, the other one really young, the smell of milk still on his uniform. "Mr. Green, don't make this complicated," the older one said. "We respect you, but the law is the law." "I know your law. It's signed by people who never stood in the wind while a drill rig roared next to their home." He wasn't shouting. He just stood on the steps, stubborn as a tree, and watched the officers hesitate. The younger one glanced at the panels and quietly said, "My grandpa's trying to put those things up too, but the city council won't let him. Says it ruins the look of the landscape." I nodded. "Tell your grandpa that the look of the landscape is the last thing you should worry about when the air smells like gas." The next day, the whole county knew that Old Man Green is fighting the government. Reporters showed up like flies to honey. One even asked, "Do you consider yourself a hero, Mr. Green?" "No, I just want the sun not to need a permit." Raymond came over with a box of donuts. "You sure stirred things up," he said. "You got fans on Facebook now." "I don't need Facebook. I need peace and a little time." "Time's the thing we're always running out of, friend. But as long as you got 1 more day, you gotta do what's right." Toward evening, Harold sat by the panels and looked up at the sky again. It was clear, no derricks, yet. He thought about how strange life turns out. He used to sign drilling permits, and now they wanted to demolish him. And yet, despite the tiredness, despite the fear, he felt like he was doing the right thing. When the sun set, he got out the same pen and wrote a new letter. Melissa, you always said you shouldn't fight people, but what's inside them? I don't know if I'm on the right side now, but for the first time, I don't seem to be afraid to look in the mirror. If I lose, at least I tried to shine. He put the letter on the table, turned off the light, and sat in the dark. The panels quietly glistened outside the window, catching the last reflections of the evening. And Harold thought, if the sun can rise every day, despite all the clouds, then I can keep going for a little while longer, too.
The morning started unusually quiet. Even Duke wasn't barking. He just sat by the gate, staring into the distance. Harold got up, poured coffee, and right there on the porch, he saw what he was afraid of: a convoy of trucks, bulldozers, and a few county SUVs. "Well, buddy," he told the dog, "looks like democracy on wheels has come to visit." The older officer, same one as before, walked into the yard. He took off his hat. "Mr. Green, we have a warrant for demolition. Please step away from the object." "What object?" Harold retorted, calmly setting his cup on the railing. "That's not an object. That's my belief in the sun. And anyway, I'm not stepping away. I live here." The officer looked at the woman from the department who was standing off to the side with papers. "Please don't make this any harder," she said. "You're making it hard when you call my roof an illegal structure." When the first bulldozer started to roll, Harold simply stood in front of it. Not dramatically, quietly, calmly, like a man who'd decided there was no more retreating. The driver hesitated. The officers were shouting, and the reporters, and there were a few now, were filming every move. "Old Farmer versus the system!" Someone was already yelling into a microphone. Eventually, the machine was turned off. Someone shouted, "That's illegal! You can't block a federal order!" "And you can't trample on a man's conscience," Harold replied calmly. While the clash of words continued, neighbors started gathering in the yard. Old Mrs. Holt brought a thermos of tea. "You always had a knack for getting into trouble, Harold, but this loud, that's new." "I just wanted a little peace and quiet," he smiled. "Now I've got my own primetime news report." Young people from town arrived with signs. "Let the sun shine! Hands off Harold's panels!" Someone even brought an acoustic guitar. The police looked confused, like they didn't understand when a routine raid had turned into a small revolution. A few hours later, the Shellman Energy representative showed up. The same young guy in the suit, but without the smile this time. "Mr. Green, we're not enemies. This is just business." "Yeah, I know. I used to say it's just a job, too, when I was capping old wells, and every time something in me died." "You can't win," the guy said firmly. "The law's not on your side, but the truth is on mine. Sometimes that's enough to last until dawn." The wind kicked up dust from the road. It felt like the earth itself was breathing, heavy but alive. One of the reporters came closer, asking why he wouldn't give up. Harold smiled with the corners of his mouth. "'Cause I already lost once." "When was that?" "When I let myself stay silent while everything around me rotted. I'm not doing that again." By evening, the situation had turned into a full-blown siege. The county called in lawyers, the press called in activists, and the activists called in even more reporters. The hashtag #LetHaroldShine appeared on social media, and the video of him standing in front of the bulldozer went viral across the country. Raymond called, choking on laughter and worry at the same time. "You're a symbol! A symbol of what the hell?" "An old guy who ain't afraid of the sun." Harold was silent for a few seconds, then quietly said, "Well, for once in my life, I'm on the right side of the poster." The next day, he woke up to the sound of a helicopter. TV news was already broadcasting live. Hundreds of people stood by the road. Some held signs, some just came to watch. And suddenly, a woman stepped out of the crowd. Not a reporter, not an official, just a local farmer. She shouted, "We're with you, Harold! If they tear down your panels, they can take ours too." The people cheered. The officer glanced at his superiors, and for the first time, he looked lost. The whole thing was turning into a public scandal. Closer to noon, the county mayor himself arrived. He stepped out, slick suit, a smile for the cameras. "Mr. Green, we understand your position, but the law, Harold cut him off, can't be stronger than common sense. What's dangerous is when people stop thinking for themselves." The mayor opened his mouth to reply, but the crowd erupted in applause. The broadcast was live, and as often happens, the authorities suddenly felt the situation was out of control. By evening, they backed off, temporarily. The officer drove up to Green and said quietly, "This isn't over, but today you won." Harold nodded. And winning ain't when someone loses. It's when they finally listen to an old grump like me. He watched the sunset. The rays settled on the panels, reflecting gold. Duke settled comfortably by his feet, tired but happy. "You know, Duke," he whispered, "maybe they'll still come tomorrow, but at least let 'em see what dignity looks like in broad daylight." That night, he didn't sleep again. The rain was tapping on the roof, but it was warm inside. A newspaper lay on the table. "Old Texas Man Challenges Oil Giants." And below the photo, his smile. Not a winner's, just a man who stopped being afraid. He picked up the pen and wrote in his diary, "The wind was strong today, but the panels held up. Guess I'll hold up a little longer, too."
The morning was bright and quiet, but the air smelled of anticipation. Harold was sitting on the porch with a mug of coffee, looking at the panels that had stored the first few kilowatts of energy overnight. They were glowing like little lighthouses in his world. "All right, old girl," he said to the panels. "Today we show 'em that even an old oil man can be a hero." TV cameras were already set up by the gate, and next to them was a crowd of local farmers, neighbors, and activists. Young folks with signs, reporters, even some politicians who'd been skeptical of his idea before. Harold got up and walked toward the bulldozers, which this time stood silently, like they were condemned. "Mr. Green," the officer said, "the Government Commission has made a decision. Your panels stay. We're recognizing the legality of your installation, and Shellment Energy is backing down." Harold stared at him, not quite believing it right away. That's not a joke? "No. Your example became such a big deal that the government decided not to push the conflict." He took a brief breath. A real victory never smells like confetti. It smells like dust, rain, and coffee. Raymond ran up with a box of donuts. "You did it, buddy! You treated it like a game, but now you're a legend!" Harold just smiled. "A legend? I just wanted the sun to stay my friend, not be bossed around by bureaucracy." "And you won!" Mrs. Holt happily concluded, patting the old oil man on the shoulder. Duke sat down next to him and quietly sighed, as if understanding peace truly reigned in the yard now. Within a week, the story had spread across the whole country. Newspapers, TV news, the internet, everyone was showing Harold. Some called him a hero, some a rebel, but he himself felt only peace. Not glory, not applause, but peace. That afternoon, Harold got a letter from his daughter, Melissa. She drove out after reading about him in the news. She stood by the solar panels, and their meeting was wordless. Just a hug, the kind that had been put off for years. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm proud of you and a little scared about how you did it. Scared? Harold made a funny face. Sweetie, if you're not afraid of the sun, there's nothing to be scared of. They stood together, watching the rays shimmer through the last drops of morning rain. Evening brought a silence that hadn't been there in ages. The panels glowed with a soft golden light, and the yard smelled of grass and wood. Harold sat on the porch, and Melissa brought him an old photo, her and his wife on the farm, before all the drilling, paperwork, and problems. "You remember," her daughter said, "how we used to dream about the light?" "I remember, and I guess it's mine now, mine and yours." That evening, he set aside his pen, the newspaper, and his diary. The house smelled of dinner, and there was still a little gold left in the sky. He sat down next to Duke and thought that even in a world where the law often ignores fairness, sometimes an old oil man can stay true to himself and win. "You know, Duke," he whispered, stroking the dog, "sometimes victory is just staying the light in the middle of the dark." And that night, the sun felt closer than ever. It wasn't rising on his farm, but in the heart of Harold Green. A heart that had learned to believe again.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more.